our next guests are very interesting people who would be delighted to answer your questions. And we're moving away from technology and biomarkers to very practical things now, because this next session has been given the title, The Essentials, Lighting, Drinking and Good Care. And this is for the next 30 minutes. But before we do that, just a reminder, please donate what you can. We've fixed our donations page. It works now. Donations are coming in. If you go to chatathon.uk/donate or go to the Chatathon website, there's a link at the top of the page there. It's the Charities Trust website. I know it's not especially nice to navigate like Just Giving is, but what it does allow you to do is to divide out the money across multiple charities rather than just one, which is what we're doing today. So we have Race Against Dementia, the Lewy Body Society, Alzheimer's Research UK and Alzheimer's Society. Race Against Dementia do brilliant work in funding research fellows that have this. This is a charity started by Sir Jackie Stewart that tries to learn from Formula One and take those rapid applications of technologies and really invest in people and strongly invest in people like we do athletes and other people that in these researchers, not just to fund their work, but also in those individuals to give them the best skills, training and preparation they need to do their work. So they're a really amazing, clever, innovative charity that have lots of brilliant ideas, and 25% of everything you donate today will go to Race Against Dementia. And I'll talk more about the other charities afterwards, but I'm not going to keep my guests waiting. I'm joined this session for the Essentials Lighting Good Care. I'm going to turn on my graphic. I've got graphics, not that you guys can see them, but I'm going to turn it on. There we go. I'm joined by the brilliant Ellice Parkinson, who's joining me as a PhD student at the University of East Anglia. Dr. Terry Quinn, who if you joined us on the Chatathon 2 years ago, you'll know the same thing. Also, I want to say winner of the runner-up of the Know It Alls Challenge last year, who is a reader and consultant in old age medicine at the University of Glasgow and is a jobbing clinician in Glasgow as well, and Kate Turley, who's a computer scientist and PhD student in digital health for dementia at Ulster University. Hi, Kate.
Hello, how are you?
Kate, I'm not that I want to put you on the spot, but is this your kind of first academic type thing where you're talking about your work? Because I know, have you just started your PhD?
I have just started, yeah. I've done a few conferences, but they were sort of in the same format. They were supposed to be in the USA actually, but they were just virtual over Zoom. So I have had some experience, but not as a sort of panel discussion. This is my first one.
Well, I hope it's fun. I'll try to make it easy.
Not too scary.
If my camera suddenly goes off, do just keep talking. It's because I'm probably eating a sandwich. I'm going to come to you first, Kate. Actually, let's stick with you. Why don't you? I've given you an introduction, so I'm going to ask you to tell us all about your work.
Yeah, no problem at all. So I'm working in a light and design company at the moment in Belfast, and then that sort of stemmed into that part-time PhD that I'm working on as well. But we're working on designing a lighting and sensing solution that's designed to support the circadian rhythm of individuals with dementia in order to then improve their well-being. So the reason that we use light for this is because light is the primary exciter or sort of stimulant for exciting the circadian rhythm. And the circadian rhythm, it's also known as sort of your body clock, your 24-hour body clock, which controls processes such as your rest activity patterns, your hormone balance, so whether you're feeling lethargic or more alert, your mood as well, and then your sleep-wake cycles. So for people with dementia in particular, their circadian rhythms are more out of sync. And this is actually heightened further if they experience common symptoms such as evening agitation or sundowning. So if we bring sort of circadian lighting that's designed to sort of support your circadian rhythm and improve your well-being into indoor environments for people with dementia, the sort of overall objective is to be able to improve their well-being through the use of this lighting. So essentially, by bringing this lighting into the indoors, we sort of have a secondary objective to monitor what that response to the lighting is. And there's two main reasons for this. So the first one is that every individual's response to lighting is different because every individual circadian rhythm is slightly different. And this depends on demographic factors such as your age, your gender, your chronotype or previous lighting exposures, and also for dementia, your dementia type. So it differs if you have Alzheimer's, fronto-temporal, vascular, for example, and then also with your state of progression of dementia. So whether you're at a mild, moderate, or severe stage. And this is what we don't fully understand at the moment. You know, we know that circadian lighting, which is essentially like daylight as well. So it mimics the sort of daylight cycle and changes in color and intensity throughout the day. We know that this sort of lighting is good for supporting your circadian rhythm and therefore your well-being, but we don't understand, you know, how this response differs depending on factors such as your demographic profile, for instance, and then how your activity and your well-being through this will then change. So this is sort of why we need that sensing solution in order to get the feedback and understand the health metrics to better the lighting on an individual basis. And secondly, then, if we have this sensing solution, we can also make these metrics accessible. So, for example, depending on where you are with your dementia diagnosis, for example, if you're in your own living environment or if you're in a care facility, if an informal or a formal caregiver has access to these metrics, they can see, for example, your location, your sleep wake, and your sleep quality for the night before, for example, which will then help them when supporting you and delivering their care as well. So that's sort of the whole objective of how we're bringing the circadian lighting in, and how that will then in turn give us information on your well-being.
That's fascinating, and it kind of highlights something that I think so many people, and I think that's why this session is so great, that people overlook. I mean, you know, when you think about lighting, I mean, I think people are just thinking about, oh, you know, is it bright enough that you don't fall over?
Yeah.
Can I still read, or can I even afford to turn the lights on right now, which is obviously an issue as well. So I guess I mean, I'd read a lot more about, particularly this time of year when we start to talk about seasonal affective disorder and
Absolutely.
the different frequency of lights. So how practically do you apply this? Is this a case of asking people to sit in front of a light for 20 minutes a day like they do with the seasonal issue, or is this actually changing the lights in the building that can then contribute without, you know, to do it more subliminally than deliberately saying you're receiving light therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. The intention is for this to be completely ambient and environmental. So it's not just for, you know, sort of 20-minute stint, which I'm sure, you know, there are studies that can still improve your well-being over certain small periods of time, or your alertness, for example, depending on, as you said, the frequency of light. So for example, for the visual purposes you mentioned before, there's more of a response to sort of yellowy wavelength colors. Whereas for your circadian rhythm, it's more of a blue wavelength light it's the melanopsin protein, which is the light sensitive protein in your eye that responds more to a blue wavelength. And so you get a larger response to your circadian rhythm with that type of lighting. So over time, you know, as we can see that the SAD disorder, you know, that's mainly in winter when there's less daylight available. So you can see that this is sort of an annual thing. It's not just a day by day basis. You know, your impact of lighting affects you every single day. So for this study, we're sort of initially piloting it for a 16-week period. And this will be in every room that an individual of dementia or an individual with dementia will frequent. So whether that be their bedroom, their common areas, it will be everywhere. And then at the end of the study, sort of see how that combined total lighting effect has implemented their well-being compared to the initial, you know, what would have been the static lighting in place at the beginning of the study.
That's great, isn't it? I mean, if we learn that this can make a genuine difference to inform sleep patterns, which we know that there's this increasing body of evidence about the importance of sleep, which we talked about at the start of the day. I mean, it'll, because you can't help but think, I slightly groan, don't I, that how many people watching have had an elderly relative or their mum or dad, and the first thing that they've done when they've had a fall is to take the lampshades off and put big, bright, fluorescent lights into rooms to make them brighter without any consideration about whether it's the right kind of light or the impact that can have in sleep. If we learn from this that by fundamentally changing the lighting around the house, I think because there's so much work going on into reducing agitation, to people not wanting to, you know, changing sleep habits can cause such massive disruption and have that we're going to talk about lost moments and time later today as well. If that can be fixed through lighting, wouldn't that be amazing that we can put this as some guidance? I mean, whether we take it up or not, but
absolutely. I think what's important about what you just said there as well is that, changing to those bright fluorescent lights again, that's sort of you're targeting what you can visually see. You're targeting your conscious decisions there. It's okay, I need this and I need that, but you don't think about targeting your subconscious and what actually controls the circadian rhythms. That's not something that's obvious that you would need to think about.
I feel like when this is playing back on YouTube, this is right now when you're watching is when an advert for Philips Hue bulbs is about to appear on the screen in this targeted kind of subliminal way that we didn't ask for. Thank you, Kate. I'm going to come back to you because I'm going to go to Ellice now, because equally as practical, we know that not only can people's sleep disruption be affected, but also their lack of drinking can have a dire consequences, and that's what your work's all about.
It is, yes. So thank you for having me. So Kate just mentioned there about
did Kate just grab a water bottle then, because we deliberately
it's nice to have the subliminal message.
I do. Do you know, every time I see you I'm paranoid that I'm not drinking enough.
I'm not. You can't help, when you work in it every day, you can't help but watch those things then. But yeah, there's the mirroring, and it works. And in with people living with dementia, just some mirroring, it works to kind of pick up a drink. It's that social experience of drinking. So yeah, I think Kate mentioned there about kind of the things that we don't necessarily think of. So as we age, we lose the thirst sensation. It's not as effective. So, and then kind of put yourself in the shoes of someone who maybe forgets to drink, maybe doesn't recognise a drink. Chris gave a fantastic insight to this this morning about taking the cupboard doors, the doors of the kitchen cupboards, so he could make a coffee easier, so he could see. So, and then he's not forgetting what he was then doing in that moment. It's all of these things which are affected when someone has cognitive impairment. And so it's not as easy as to think, I'm thirsty, I'm going to go make myself a drink. So it's kind of thinking of that wider picture of what's going on and how we can support someone best.
So we talked before about strategy. So, tell us, I mean, for people who aren't persuaded, what happens when people living with dementia don't drink enough? I wasn't going to say water. I don't mean just don't drink enough. What are the consequences of
so if we take a step
hydrating?
back, our systematic review has just, we estimated from a systematic review that about a third of older people, so people over the age of 65, are dehydrated. That's in the general global population of the included studies that we had within a systematic review. So if you're looking at that as a basis, a third of 1 in 3 older people are dehydrated. That's really quite high. Yeah? Then factor in mobility problems, strength, grip, being able to reach a drink, being able to factor in, does anyone know actually how much we're supposed to be drinking? You mentioned water there. Does that equate to our 6 to 8 cups? Is it 6 to 8 cups? How much are we supposed to be drinking? Then factor in the cognitive impairment, like the things I've just mentioned, swallowing difficulties, communication difficulties. So people living with dementia are at higher risk of becoming dehydrated because they're not drinking enough. The associations with dehydration, so low intake dehydration is which I'm talking about from not drinking enough, are things like falls, UTIs, infections, pneumonia, cancer, renal impairment, diabetes, cognitive impairment, hospitalisation, and if people are admitted dehydrated to hospital, which can be quite common, they are more at risk of dying in hospital. So the consequences of dehydration are so vast and so prevalent and severe that it really should be at the forefront of our thinking with any older person, but particularly if someone has more risk factors. It really is about supporting someone to drink and making drinking fun. What we find is that people take more of a reactive approach to drinking. So it's kind of when it becomes difficult, how do we now get someone to take some fluids? Like, how can we get someone to take 30 mils or 50 mils? And there's this focus on kind of quite
so focus in on the volume, like how much is there?
Yeah, just like this quite clinical situation of drinking, whereas let's have a proactive approach when we approach kind of middle age, later life, thinking about women should be drinking 1.6 litres of drinks, men should be drinking 2 litres of drinks plus 20% from our foods. We don't know that as a society. That information isn't well known. So it's knowing that, knowing what is in this cup, how much is in there, which is going to go towards my fluids, and having this proactive approach to drinking. So
your research then looks across the board at that. So not only kind of exploring the consequence of not drinking, but then also about, I'm guessing, about how you practically have strategies that encourage people to drink sufficient amounts, whether
Absolutely.
they're at home or in a care home or in a hospital, maybe as an inpatient.
Yeah, so I haven't focused, originally I was going to focus on hospital settings. We are doing a systematic review for hospital settings. It's just quite a different population, so we have separated those out. But you're right, so clinical signs and symptoms, like your typical clinical signs and symptoms of dehydration, urine colour, skin tear, sunken eyes, pinch in the skin, do not work in older people. It's a real misconception that works for people. It doesn't work for older people. Great in other populations, maybe not for older people. So the easiest way to improve dehydration, prevent dehydration, is drinking, which is why I focus on both of them. So in older people, we need to get people to be drinking to prevent dehydration, to prevent the serious ill health that comes with that.
And I'm going to come to you in a second, Terry. One last question. So for anybody who's watching, I guess, who is a carer, and they you know, a common, I've been visiting the Facebook dementia groups this last week, because this is where we're hoping that, you know, people living with dementia, carers and affected by it would come and watch today. What advice would you give to somebody? Because a common thing that comes up there is, oh, my mum stopped eating, or my mum stopped drinking. How do I get them to drink? And there's lots of comments from people, but tell me, as the researcher, what advice would you give to those people?
I think it's always a multi-pronged approach. Offer a variety of drinks. I think this came up earlier about taste changes in dementia as the disease progresses. So there tends to be more of a preference for sweeter things. Offer things that maybe someone didn't like before, which they may like now. So offering a variety of drinks, making it a sociable experience. So COVID really impacted that, when people weren't allowed to drink together. To make it sociable. You
mentioned before as well, drinking in front of the person, just like you having a drink.
Yeah. Making it fun, make it part of an activity. Ice lollies, using foods to it. So during the heat waves this year, there was some great initiatives like mocktail bars and afternoon teas and things that make it a really fun experience. As well as all the other things, just keep trying. Just keep trying. Leave drinks, if someone is able to drink themselves, leave drinks within reach. Maybe don't fill a cup too much. You can get some great different drinking vessels, say beakers, or using a straw. What works for that individual? There's lots out there now.
Going into those social settings. That's brilliant advice, Ellice. And Terry, because what I love about, I mean, I've met Terry before several times, and Terry does amazing work, both clinically, but then I'm always amazed you have time for all these extra things you do as well, whether that's on brain health or in the research network or with Cochrane. And I know Cochrane, you're amazing at taking the things that Kate and Ellice are doing and then helping spread that, right? I mean, turning that into real stuff. Tell us about your work, and I'm particularly interested. Well, you do so much. Tell us all about it. All of it.
Everything.
Tell us everything in one go.
So on my CV, it says, Terry has a broad research portfolio, but what that actually means is I can't focus on one thing. I just jump from topic to topic. But what I'm interested in are the things that affect older people. So I'm interested in dementia. I'm interested in brain health. I'm interested in delirium, and I'm interested in frailty, and I'm interested in stroke. But I thought, rather than talk about the research that I do, I wanted to talk about the work that I do around bringing together other people's research. So Adam, you mentioned Cochrane. I'm involved with a number of bodies that take the really great research that's out there around dementia and try and bring it together and make sense of it as a whole. And there are lots of different techniques that we've developed doing that. And we can do that to produce reviews on topics. Ellice mentioned that she'd been working on reviews looking at water and hydration. And we can take that one step further again. And increasingly recently, I've been doing a lot of work with guideline producers. So working with NICE and with SIGN to take, you know, that great dementia research that we're producing in the UK that charities are funding, and moving it from the pages of a journal into something that's in a guideline. And once it's in a guideline, that's when it starts making a change on how we practice clinically.
And Cochrane's worldwide, right? I mean, this isn't just a UK thing. This is in Australia. It's elsewhere in the world. So research that happens here can inform globally. Yeah. I have some sad news for you. Unfortunately, Cochrane Dementia isn't going to continue past 2023, but evidence synthesis is going to continue. So the Cochrane model is going to change a little bit, but we will still absolutely be taking research, taking evidence, pulling it together, and then creating summaries for researchers, but also creating summaries for people in government, and creating summaries for people that are living with conditions as well. And there are other, I mean, I should put a plug in for things like, because I recently was on the group for the continence themed working group for NIHR evidence. Yeah. I think they're a little bit specific because they kind of look at the NIHR funded research, don't they, specifically, yeah, rather than something that might have been funded elsewhere. But you know, equally, it's bringing together these. So Cochrane scan the horizon, find the relevant evidence, and then bring that into one place. And that's to, who is that guidance then aimed at? Is this a, you know, your man, woman on the street? Is this for healthcare professionals, or for, who's it for?
All of them and more. I think one of the things that we did really well in Cochrane was getting the message out to lots of different, to use the jargon, stakeholders. So sure, the main product would be a Cochrane review that would generally be read by academics and clinicians, but we would also produce lay summaries. And we spent a lot of time making sure that lay summaries were properly accessible to people that aren't coming from that academic or clinical background. And we also make white papers, and we make policy documents for, you know, civil servants that are working in an area and don't have the time to work through the 50 or 60 pages of a full Cochrane review. So we make bite-sized summaries for them too. And although Cochrane Dementia as an entity isn't going to continue past next year, all of that activity is going to continue.
And this is where I think I touched on this earlier today about the push to kind of do more with research findings and implementation. And that's why I'm really pleased to do this event today, because whilst some of the research we're talking about today hasn't yet published, it isn't doing. Of course, if we just wait until research is published into journals that everyday people don't read, it doesn't have the impact. And I think it's important to give people an opportunity to talk about their work while it's ongoing, so that we can learn from it earlier and benefit from that, but also put it into some use. And I think there's probably more. Would you agree that there's more? Maybe Cochrane could be good at this, in providing more guidance for researchers about how to use their research findings, how to either package that up at the end so you can give it to somebody who might fund it or commission it, or throughout the study to say, well, you know, there's different things you can do. You can publish reports. And I think often what I've seen is that any communications about the progress of a report, there's been guidance for a while to say you must give that back to research participants. Mm-hmm. So, you know, giving feedback to the people in the trial, but it can really help people who aren't in the trial as well. I mean, Kate and Ellice, I think your work is fascinating and has such potential benefit. It'd be such a shame if we have to wait for your PhD and then find time for you to write that up and get that out there before people are going to really learn from that. People need to know that now. So Terry, it's a shame about Cochrane, but maybe you could go back, let's get Cochrane around the table. Let's come up with new ways to better share, to do more public events. I think any researchers that are out there, I'm doing this today, but I'm not special. You could do this. Anybody can go on YouTube Live, literally, and talk about your work. You don't need to, it's not a case of being big-headed. I'm ranting now, but literally anybody can do this. You can create an account on YouTube, you live stream yourself, you give it the right name so that people can find it when they search for it. You post it in some dementia groups. And as long as this is, we don't want pseudoscience people to do this. It's got to be, but this is a way of getting your research out there. Please do be inspired by this, and if anybody needs help or guidance on how to do that, come see me, talk to me, I'll share. Ellice, what's next for your work? Obviously implementation, not that I've just told you what you've got to do. What's coming next with your work, Ellice?
What you mentioned is really important. So I actually
well, you do it, don't you? I've seen your picture on Twitter. You stand in the hospital reception with booklets and water bottles telling people to drink. You live it. I mean, you really do it.
Try to, so if it's like giving free care home training or kind of having those conversations throughout, I really do try to kind of spread that message as much as I can. And research networks and patient and public involvement groups who have helped to input in my study and PhD project, I very much try to then have that open dialogue and make sure that they will be the first ones to then hear when there are findings. But yeah, so I now started the drink study, which is in an in-depth case study and ethnographic observations as well as unstructured interviews. It's a 6-month project in a care home, a single care home, and it's just observing drinking, literally taking a step back with minimal assumptions and just seeing what is going on. There have been no kind of sustainable long-term improvements in fluid intake for people living with dementia in care homes so far, unfortunately. So we're just seeing over 24-hour clock for 6 months and just seeing what's going on, and all social actors within the care home are eligible participants, and very much wanting to involve people with dementia who do or may not have capacity to provide informed consent.
And that's how all these successful service improvement programs work. I mean, I worked back in the day, I worked on MRSA and hospital-associated infections, and the first step is always to go to those good hospitals, go to the bad hospitals, stand in a corner and watch what's going on, make those kind of observations, doing those hand hygiene audits and looking at the notes to see if your VIP scores have been done for the, catheter's been looked at, but not intervening. That can come later. Thank you, Ellice. Kate, what's coming next for you?
Next for me, so the design work that we've done in creating that circadian lighting solution, we've essentially finished that now. So we've got our hardware, we've created the software in order to get those health-related metrics back. So in the new year, we've undergone our whole ethical process. We've got approval, so we'll be heading into a care home and actually setting up that whole solution to get our data back.
That's really exciting. Go on, I'll let you mention. What's the name of the company again?
Chroma Lighting. Shout out there.
Chroma Lighting. You can, and there's a link on the webpage if you're interested in that. But it's great that care homes are willing, also kind of coming forward and participating in research to kind of really make things better, which we know opening their doors up to researchers and potential scrutiny is always something that's a barrier to overcome. So well done. And thank you very much, Kate, Ellice, Kate Turley, Ellice Parkinson, and Dr. Terry Quinn. Thank you very much for your last half an hour. That was fascinating. That was really, really good. I'd quite like to get you all back on the podcast, but we'll make this a recording available. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you very much.
Okay, coming up on the next half hour, 2:30 to 3:30, we have the great outdoors. So we've moved from staying inside and under electric lights and being sure you drink to what I'm sure is probably the best alternative to clever lighting, is to being outside under God's canvas. Is that right? Do you agree, Steve? Is that where everybody should be, is outside? Before we move on, so in our next session, in all seriousness, 2:30 to 3 o'clock is the great outdoors, the benefits of nature and tech help. I'm going to be joined by Dr. Esme Wood, Dr. Stephen Price, and Dr. Stephen Owen. Steve and Stephen are both from Exeter, and Esme is at the University of Gloucestershire. But before we do that, I'm going to remind everybody, I'm going to turn on my thing. Come on, everybody. it's donation time. So there you go. There's a banner at the bottom of the screen to remind you to do this, that today, not only are we talking about research, but we're also raising money for 4 brilliant charities. The Lewy Body Society is a small charity that really punch, as we've heard, I hate to say this, I don't want to say they punch well above their weight. They do an amazing job. They're a small charity. They do brilliant work, not just on funding research, but also on awareness campaigns and to support people living with Lewy body dementia. They do these crazy, amazing things as well, like knitting and producing brilliant calendars. They have such a committed, enthusiastic group of supporters, and all their money doesn't go on advertising or promotion or lots of other things or into the pockets of bigwigs. It really does go into funding genuine things that will help. So please do consider making a donation today. 25% of what you give will go to the Lewy Body Society. And coming up at 4:30 today, we're going to be joined by all 4 of the charities who will tell us a little bit more about their work. You can donate at chatathon.uk/donate or go to the chatathon.uk website. You can see that on the screen now. Before I come to my current guest, I'm going to play you a quick film so that I can leave the room for a second. And this film now, I'm trying to find a long one. All my films, why did I ask the charities to send me 30 seconds to 1 minute films? I really need about 2 minutes, not a minute and a half for the things I need to do. But we're going to play a short film now from Alzheimer's Research UK, and we'll be back in a minute.
I met my husband when I was 19 in India. To cut a long story short, I fell in love with him pretty much straight away. So there was lots of evidence, but I didn't really pick it up. First one I remember really clearly is when shopping, and I said, "Can you pass me a pack of crisps?" And he struggled that. He goes, "What's crisps?" And then his behavior got a bit more dramatic. He became more paranoid, and he kind of started changing. So I took him to doctors, and then they diagnosed at UCL and said, okay, he's got FTD, which stands for Fronto-temporal dementia. Your personality goes, your judgment goes. It's almost scandalous that we've known this condition for over 100 years, and yet we have no answers to that. We can't really find a cure for these masses with our research, and I think that is so critical.
Race Against Dementia supports early career scientists in their research around the world. Our scientists are supported by the RAD Leadership and Development Programme. That's interesting to hear that from you.
Race Against Dementia is going about it the right way, invested in new talent. I think there's a lot that we could learn. Being hungry for change is the way to go.
Let's beat dementia together.